Today we are going to be talking about converting quadratics that are in standard form into vertex form so that we can more easily graph them. So as a reminder, standard form, it looks like ax squared plus bx plus c. And we want to take something in standard form and convert it to vertex form, which we should remember is a times x minus h squared plus k. So we're going to go through the process here step by step, and as we do, you can see the example on the left-hand side, and we're going to write out what's going on in each step on the right-hand side. So you can see our original equation up here is x squared plus 8x plus 9. So step 1, they have added those parentheses. So we want to put parentheses around the x squared and the x term. So we're grouping those together. Then in that next step, we should see that we have this b over 2 squared that's gotten added. So we are going to add b over 2 squared inside the parentheses, and we're going to find the solution to it, so what it's equal to. So in this case, our b value is 8. So we're going to take 8 divided by 2 squared, and that's going to be 16. So once we've solved it, we are going to add the b over 2 squared solution inside the parentheses. So that's where that 16 is coming from. And in order to keep it balanced, we're going to subtract it outside the parentheses to keep that equation equal to the original equation. So we can see here that we have a plus 16 and a minus 16. And that'll keep our equation balanced and equal to the original equation, but it's given us a quadratic inside those parentheses now that's more easily factorable. So your next step is going to be taking that trinomial and factoring it. So we should know that it's a perfect square trinomial, which means that we are going to square root the c term to factor it. When we do that, the square root of 16 here is going to be 4. So we're going to have x plus 4 and x plus 4 as our factors. Once we've done that, we've got an x plus 4 squared. So we're going to simplify, and we're going to write the equation in that vertex form. So remember, vertex form is that parentheses, that quantity squared, plus or minus a value. So in this case, it's x plus 4 squared minus 7. Now, if I graph both of those using our strategies that we've done before, you can use a calculator or do it by hand, you will see that both graphs come out to be exactly the same. So it would look like something like this on both of them. So you can check your work by graphing both of them. Now, what we need to talk about is what happens when we have an a value out front. So when we have that a value out in front, it changes just a little bit about what we're going to do. So you can see that that first step is the same. So we're going to put parentheses around the x squared and x terms. We're going to group them together. And our goal is still going to be able to create perfect square trinomial again. So what we do to start that process is we are going to factor out that a value. So to do that, we're going to factor it out from both terms in the parentheses. And that way we get that a value out in front of our vertex form that we're eventually going to get into. All right, so once we've done that, then it's pretty similar to what we were doing before. So again, we're going to add the b over 2 squared inside the parentheses and find the solution to it. So in this case, we had 10 divided by, or negative 10 divided by 2 squared. So that means we're going to add 25 inside the parentheses. We are going to put that inside the parentheses, and we're going to remember to subtract it outside the parentheses in order to keep it equal to that original equation. When you do that, you want to make sure you're just remembering that that value is being multiplied by the factored out a value when subtracting it. So what we're talking about here is that we had a negative 2 times 25 here. So when we subtract it, we really need to subtract out that negative 2 times the 25 in order to keep it balanced. All right, then we are going to again factor that perfect square trinomial. So remember, to do that, you're going to square root the c term. In this case, that c term is 25. So when I square root it, I get 5. So my factors are going to be x minus 5 and x minus 5. And then I'm going to simplify. So I'm going to write it in that vertex form all the way out. And again, when you graph those two, it's going to come out the exact same, whether it's in standard form or it's in vertex form. And that's a great way to check to make sure you did all of your math correctly in those steps. Make sure it comes out to the exact same graph. Okay, we're going to go through some examples here. So for number 1, we have a negative x squared minus 2x minus 4. So first things first, I'm going to group my x squared and my x term together. This has an a value of negative 1, so I'm going to factor out the negative 1 from those two terms. And then I'm going to do my b over 2 squared. So my b value is 2. 2 over 2 squared is 1. So I'm going to add that into the parentheses. And then I'm going to remember that that's actually a negative 1 times 1 from the number out in front. So I am going to subtract out a negative 1 times 1 on the outside of the parentheses in order to keep it balanced. Okay, now I am going to factor my perfect square here. So I'm going to square root that 1. That leaves me with a 1. So my factored form is x plus 1 squared. And on the outside here, when I simplify, I get a positive 1 minus 4, which is going to be negative 3. So my final vertex form is going to be negative x plus 1 squared minus 3. Okay, we're going to jump now in the interest of time to number 3. Looking at number 3 here, I have no a value, so I'm still going to group those together. But when I group those together, I just need to add the b over 2 squared. So b over 2 squared in this case would be 5 over 2 squared, which is 6.25. So I am going to take that and I am going to add it inside the parentheses. And then I'm going to remember to subtract it outside the parentheses also. Okay, so now I'm going to factor that perfect square trinomial by square rooting the 6.25. So again, use a calculator if needed, but the square root of 6.25 is 2.5. So it'd be x plus 2.5 squared would be the factor of that perfect square trinomial. And then when I simplify the outside, I have negative 0.25. So my vertex form in its final look is x plus 2.5 squared minus 0.25. All right, let's do 2 more here. So looking at number 5, when I group those together, I notice that there is an a value of 4. So I'm going to factor that out first and get x squared minus x in the parentheses. And then I am going to figure out what that b over 2 squared would look like. So in this case, that would look like 1/4. So when I add that in the parentheses, I'm going to remember that I'm actually really adding 4 times 1/4. So when I subtract it out, I need to multiply 4 times 1/4. And then keep the plus 8 there. So I'm filling in these in order to keep it balanced. So when I simplify there, my factored form has the 4 out in front. And then when I square root 1/4, I get 1/2. So minus 1/2 squared. And then when I simplify the negative 4 times a fourth plus 8, I get 7. Okay, last one. Let's group. And I'm going to factor out that a value. So I'm going to factor out a negative 2. That's going to leave me with x squared minus 11x. And I'm going to take that negative 11 over 2 and square it to figure out what I'm adding on both sides. In this case, that comes out to 30.25. So I'm going to add 30.25 in those parentheses. And ran into that a little bit, but I'm going to subtract out negative 2 times that 30.25. And I still have the minus 11. So now we got a little long there. All right, so let's factor here. When I factor and square root 30.25, I get x minus 5.5 squared. And when I simplify all that mess at the end, I get 60.5 minus 11. So that's going to give me that's going to give me plus 49.5. So that would be my final vertex form. All right, we'll see you next time.